Hey, welcome to your readings for the week of the 21st through the 27th. It's officially Aquarius season, and nobody on this list cares because I don't have any Aquarians on the list. So I'm over here celebrating by myself. Yay! Should put on my crown. Okay, what do we got going on? Uranus is going direct this week. And what is cool about Uranus going direct this week is we're entering a 2-month period of no retrogrades. All of the planets are going direct, and that may just open things up for us to get some forward movement and actually feel like we're fixing problems instead of creating more. So that's kind of nice, right? I've been looking forward to that. We're gonna just go ahead and jump onto our list here. And we are gonna start with Darcy like we always do. Hi, Darcy. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, Uranus goes direct. It's been retrograde for like a really long time in Taurus. And in doing the readings for the year, I have kind of taken a look at it, and Uranus is really solid in Taurus for another year. I'm pretty sure though that that's going to change, although you'll kind of see him coming back and forth for a little bit, maybe a couple of years before he officially moves on. But we're getting there. That's the point. And the point is that we're getting there. I think he hits like 26 degrees and then goes retrograde at the end of the year again, or towards the end of the year. So that's at 19 now. That's significant enough to predict that next year we're going to see some movement out of Taurus. So that's kind of nice. It is a 7-year commitment, so the commitment is almost over. Couple of things here. We don't have a lot of challenges, which is really nice. In terms of planet interactions, but there is really kind of an interesting combination here because Uranus starts off the week focused on self in retrograde, goes direct about midweek, moves into focus on inner self, like, all the stuff that's holding us back from doing what we need to do. Jupiter's focus is already there. Now, Jupiter isn't a square with Pluto and the Sun, which are focused on career. So this may bring up some triggers around career success. I'm sort of getting the like I'm hearing the words nothing good ever happens to me, or of course I'm not the one to get the job or the promotion or blah blah blah, whatever, was too good of an opportunity. It's it's those thoughts really, I think, that influence a lot, and I don't really feel that you entertain those kind of thoughts like a lot. It's not something that you do on a regular basis, but it's really hard to manage them, I think, when they start to infiltrate in. And so this is kind of an opportunity for you to sort of identify how the trigger works so that you can sort of manage it from here on out. Around that challenge is nothing but good, though, because Jupiter continues to be in a grand sextile with Mercury and Mars and Saturn. Saturn's focus is on your support system, those that support you. Mercury and Mars are focused on long-term goals. So this working through triggers is actually really helpful. It's helping you find the support that you need to get what you want, to be able to achieve those goals. They don't have to be big, huge goals either. We're not talking about building the Taj Mahal here. We're just talking about making some, specific and or significant changes in terms of how your life operates. And there's definitely a lot of good energy going into that. I also want to say that the assistance, the support comes from an unlikely source. I'm not sure why I want to say that, but I'm gonna say it nonetheless because that's what I'm picking up on. It's what's interesting about it actually is what my thoughts are triggering on this, we'll just say, is your friend, your roommate, because she's a very responsible person, but there's that darker side as well. And so it's kind of one of those things where normally you would look at somebody like that on the surface and think that is a train wreck waiting to happen, but not at the same time. Like there's a different side. There's a lot of duality with her, I think. So I feel like not necessarily that it's her, but that the assistance comes from somebody that you wouldn't necessarily think would necessarily be helpful in that way, if that makes any sense at all. And Mars and Mercury focused on your long-term goals. In Capricorn, this kind of adds an interesting layer to the whole process also, because Capricorn is very steadfast and focused sort of energy, which is really good for you being a Taurus. Mars is a very aggressive energy. So it's almost like, even if you get, I almost feel like the offer that you don't get isn't the one you wanted anyways, but the fact that it was a no is still offensive. If that makes any sense at all. Because I mean, it doesn't, like, it just doesn't make sense why we do this to ourselves. Why we act like this, I guess. Um, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but we do. And it's kind of catching ourselves when we are acting silly like that and going, why am I acting silly about this? I don't care. I kind of went through something similar to that. I went to a store in not the area that my office is in, but the area that my home was in years ago. And just popped in to see if they were looking for a reader. And the woman was like, "Oh yeah, maybe, well, let's make an appointment. You can give me a reading." She paid me for the reading, all of that stuff. And we sat down and we did the reading. And within like 2 minutes of it, she's like, "Can I record this? Because this is really good stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, do whatever you want." I felt really good after that reading and leaving there and everything. And then I didn't hear anything for like weeks. And I was like, "What the hell?" And so I finally I went in there and messaged them, and it turned out that she did message me, and for some reason I couldn't see it. I don't know why. One of those odd things that happened. And but her answer was "Thank you, but we're not really looking for your type of services at this time," right? And I was like gobsmacked by this. I was so offended. I was so mad. I can't remember ever being so mad in my entire life. Like, how could she not bother that? It was crazy. And yet at the same time, when I first went in to do the session, I found out she was a Virgo. I had just been dealing with a Virgo that was horrible, okay, for like a really long time. And that was a red flag to me. Like, maybe I don't want to do this. So it didn't make any sense why I was just so offended, other than the fact is that she didn't want me. So, we all kind of sort of have our moments with that sometimes. Very end of the week, the moon moves into a trine with Jupiter. So this creates a grand trine between Jupiter, Venus now, and of course the moon. And the moon is like right there on the cusp of your home and those you love. It's just kind of bringing both of them together there a little bit. Venus is focus is on finances, and of course we have Jupiter it's still kind of focused on the release of inner trauma. And to be honest, that is going to be a focus for the next few weeks, unfortunately, is this inner trauma release, which needs to happen because let's face it, if we don't take the time to release, to clean out the closet every now and then, it gets awful cluttered, so it's definitely not the most fun thing in the world to do, but it's a necessary evil, I guess. And for our own success, it just makes sense. And why we do things that don't make sense, I don't know. That's going to be our question for the week, I guess. Like, why do humans do things that don't make sense? But there's a lot of really good energy towards finances and spending time with those you love. And, really just because the moon and Venus are such emotional and feminine and flowy signs. It's almost like, a reunion of all the people that you love. And I don't really necessarily think that that's specifically what it is, but it feels that way. And I kind of like that. And there's no worries about money. At least not on that day. I can't figure out why we keep thinking that, we should or deserve to, live a life where we don't worry about money. I don't really think anybody, even people who have a ton of it, don't have that life, where they're not worrying about money in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's just part of the process. Knight of Wands. Look at him. He's like a gallant sword on the horse. Here I come. What is that? The knight in shining armor we're all looking for, which is awesome. Knight of Wands in this position indicates strong-mindedness, a nonconformist movement, and travel. That whole strong-minded nonconformist thing, obviously you're a Taurus. It makes total sense. And I feel like that's really the focus for the week for you, actually, is to embrace that part of you. I think a lot of times, those of us that are very strong in our convictions and refuse to move from that get a lot of flack for that, especially women, because, God forbid we actually have an opinion and stick to it. But yeah, I think that that's really, I think it's really necessary for you to be stubborn about what you want and not settle just because it's convenient, if that makes sense. So I kind of feel things are moving. They're moving, they're going. And all you got to do is keep up. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Kendra. So we have we have some interesting stuff going on here. The first thing is Uranus. Focus is still on self. I think really feel this is the last week that focus is going to be on self, and self-care. I just have to throw this in there so I don't forget, as I did all the horoscopes yesterday. I did the recording for all the horoscopes yesterday, and I kind of ran out of time. So I'm doing the readings today, which is Saturday. But I kept thinking about you, and you kept popping in my mind. And when I was doing the Taurus horoscope, it was like you and I were sitting down. I was sitting next to your bed and you were sick, and the only words that were allowed to come out of my mouth was, how many times do you want to learn this lesson before you decide that or how many times do you need to get sick before you learn this lesson? Something along those lines. It seemed kind of rude coming out of my mouth, yes. But the significance of that to me is, I understand the energy of 98 miles an hour until you fall flat on your face, and then you can only do 2 miles an hour after that. I do try to balance, both every single day, so I'm not falling flat on my face. I just have my half the day I'm go, 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 and the other half of the day I'm like, chill. in the Zen zone, which does kind of help. But it is all about balance, and maybe toning down the 90 miles an hour into like 50 miles an hour, and just taking a slow, smooth ride through the day or what have you. It just, to me, that coming up said to me, I need to, it's a reminder. And I think that what tends to happen is the go, 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 and you forget. And it just, even if you have to write it down and, on a something and put it somewhere where you see it every day, don't forget your rest time, your meditation time, your what have you. What's interesting this week, Uranus is retrograde at the beginning of the week, about midweek, it goes direct. And it starts off being focused on self while it's retrograde. So to me, that has a lot to do with I kind of feel like Uranus is a very rebellious, making change all the time, and in his retrograde state it's like, no, keep going the way you're going without changing, and then everything changes. But as he goes direct, he moves into that inner trauma space with Jupiter. So both of these planets are now focused on inner trauma, which means that triggers are probably going to come up. Now, it depends on the individual how many triggers we're talking about here, because there are some people that have done no inner work. There are some people who have done a lot of inner work. I can't say there's anybody that's done all of their inner work. And so it really depends on, to me, triggers are necessary for parts of you that you haven't worked through yet, and that's really what you want to be careful for or watch out for, because it can sometimes be something that you would not even consider to be a trigger at all, or even think about anymore, because it's something that you completely forgot, or it's something that you thought was insignificant, but it turns out there's a piece of that insignificance that's not insignificant, if that makes sense. So Jupiter, with its growth and expansion, is really like hyperdrive, cleaning out that closet. Let's get this crap out of here. And it's going 90 miles an hour doing just that, which I can totally see you doing. I can see me doing it too. There's good points and there's bad. Again, you have to have balance there. Jupiter square with Pluto and the sun is really the only major challenge that we're dealing with this week. And this, I think, is what is going to trigger the triggers, because Pluto and the sun are focused on long-term career goals. So it's like hitting a stumbling block in that area, and that stumbling block sends you into this, oh my God, panic state, right? And I think, and everything else that's happening around it is sort of helping you through that. At the beginning of the week, Jupiter is in a grand sextile with Saturn, as well as Mars and Mercury. Mars and Mercury are also focused on long-term goals, and Saturn is your support system. So I almost feel like, the panic happens, and it's your husband that comes in and looks at you dead in the eye and says, Kendra, come on, come on. This is, come on. You've already done this before. It's almost like he approaches you in a way that is very different to what you would normally think or in the way he would normally approach you, if that makes sense. It's kind of weird. And I do see him playing a part in that support system, but he's not the only one. In terms of the energy going into your long-term goals, because Mars is very much at the head of the realm of this. This is where I tend to look at it as you're going 98 miles an hour too much, and the balance is needed, because Mars energy, it just does. It's like a flame underneath Like to me, when I am wearing my slippers, I'm not moving. But when I'm wearing my shoes, it's like I got a rubber ball underneath my butt. Like I can't sit still. I have to keep moving. I have to keep going because my shoes are on. And so that means I can't, I have to keep doing stuff. And that's kind of that feeling that I am getting from you. It's a little bit too much. If you scaled it down a little bit, it wouldn't be such a catastrophic mess, if that makes sense. At the end of the week, that grand sextile does not include Mars and Mercury anymore. It moves to Venus, which is focused on finances. So this brings a lot of really good energy into um, financial success and finding creative ways of dealing with that financial success. The moon coming in at the very, very end of the week moves into a grand trine with Jupiter and Venus. And it's like sitting right there on the cusp of the home and those you love. And I really get like a celebration vibe from this. Like, this has been a tough week. It's been really hard work, but we did it and everything is great. Let's take the day to have togetherness and to celebrate and to just be a family and enjoy our time together. I mean, it's not even a whirlwind of a week of a week. It's like a whole series of really good things. One thing that's not bad, but it does trigger a panic, but you get through it, and and you keep going, and the sky's the limit, and the sky's the limit keeps coming up around this, and there's a lot of light blue around it also, like the sky. So in terms of either the situation or this offer, I'm not sure what it is. And light blue, I'd look at, I don't know off the top of my head. I know that blue is the color of connection. I think light blue is a little bit different. So if you choose to look it up, see what that means. Okay, I'm going to shuffle one more time here. Cards want to split right there. I was gonna laugh if I pulled cups because it's light blue. That's awesome. 7 of Cups. What's interesting about this card here is you have all the elements in it, and he's actually like a wizard. And so you have the devil in there, the pentacles are right in there. You've got a dolphin that represents water there, and the air, right? And all these things, the fire-breathing dragon, the sword, all that stuff. Um, it's kind of cool. I like that card. 7 of Cups. Tricky situation requiring great care. Possible treachery and deceit. Not what I was expecting. Okay. But this actually could have a lot to do with this quote unquote panic thing. So this actually is very helpful approaching any situation. You're dealing with a lot of different people, right? It can sometimes be hard to tell if the person is honest or if the person is if there's something behind it. Narcissism very well, obviously, from your prior experience. Your intuition definitely should be playing a part in any decisions that you make. And this could be actually the source of the panic, is that it's not that something goes wrong. It's almost like you pick up a red flag around a person, and that's what triggers the panic, because it's a personality trigger and not necessarily a situational trigger. So definitely take some time to meditate on that. It doesn't, you want to be careful of when the trigger happens. Your brain goes into like 20 different directions of all the possibilities. And I think that's really what you want to try and avoid as much as possible, because that is where we get confused and we don't know what to do, right? And it also is hard to meditate on it and focus, and all this stuff. So that might give us a clue of what's going on here. Interesting stuff. So that's what I have for you. I am moving on to Jeannette. We have some moon action this week. Actually, let's just go ahead and kick off the week with the Gemini moon. Why not? I mean, mm, mm. That is not as hot and fresh as it could be. Yeah, Gemini moon. Okay, focuses on the past. Vespa goes direct. So Vespa starts off the week in retrograde, where you're searching for that security, goes into direct motion, where getting that security or being able to feel that security feels a little bit more realistic than, say, it did before, when it felt like you were searching for it somewhere in your past. The moon comes into Gemini. Well, I think it ended in Gemini last week. So we're kicking off the week with this right in the middle. To be honest with you, Sunday, not really a big deal. As it's moving into conjunction with Vespa, you might feel some sort of tinges of, looking back, or, you have conversations, like, say, with your mom about people that are no longer there. We have those kind of moments from time to time. Nothing major. It's just one of those things that, we tend to do. It's as we move into Monday, where we kind of see a challenge with it, unfortunately, because it does move into a T-square with Venus and Neptune. Venus is focused on finances. We're talking about security here, and financial security is one of the biggest things. I mean, that is our security, honestly, in this world. And Neptune, which is focused on your support system. So I kind of feel a couple of things coming from this. One, triggers of people who were supposed to be supportive at one time in the past that turned out not to be supportive. These could be triggered by, your relationship. So it's almost like patterns, mimicking patterns from before. There's also an element of using your intuition to understand why they're being like this, rather than getting defensive and reacting to it, if that makes sense. And it's the getting defensive and reacting to it that always gets us in trouble. That's when a fight starts. So, for example, if I'm in a good mood and my husband walks in and he's just, starts yelling about, how everything is all the way of the world on his shoulders and blah 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 blah. If I'm in a good mood, I can sit back and let him vent his frustration, and be like, okay, let's figure out what we're going to do about that, right? And then just kind of help him navigate out of that. When I'm in a bad mood, it's a whole different story, right? As you well know, I'm sure, in a bad mood, the last thing I want to do is deal with somebody else who wants to vent their frustrations, because my frustration level is high. So I'm more likely to be in a defensive mood, and possibly even take what he's saying personally. That's where things get really, really, really tricky. So take a nap. No, I'm just kidding. It's not to say, okay, that when I am in a bad mood, I can't still navigate the situation better. And that's where it takes work to be able to put where you're at aside to kind of help them, him sort of navigate through that, if that makes sense. The moon is in a trine with Saturn, and Saturn is also about support. So it's, Saturn is about being responsible, and that's mainly what that's all about. What I see in the world is a lot of people who mooch off of other people, and those moochers um love to walk around and talk about how this person is always there for them and blah 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 blah. And part of that is to make themselves look good or better or whatever. um Part of that is, which just it makes them feel more important. I think the bottom line here is that um we're responsible for building the right support system, and those people that are going around, you know uh just on and on and on about all the people that support them are not necessarily choosing the responsible support. They're just getting whatever they can get, right? And you're not that person. And it's okay, by the way, to be grateful and talk about, the people that have been supportive to you. Don't get me wrong. um it's a trigger for me, and it's uncomfortable for me because generally that happens the most with people that are using me, if that makes sense. So when my grandma, who's not using me, is saying that, it's I want to fight against it. I really do. Only because, my mother would do the same thing, but usually when she was looking for something. So she's trying to butter me up to get me in a mood it's a manipulation thing. And I don't care for that. Once the moon leaves, things do calm down. It's not quite so crazy anymore, which is good. Focus continues to still be on the past, but it's not in like I don't want to say this. It's not like you're pining. It's almost like you're bringing old ideas into now because you can, because you have time for them. And so it's more for creative purposes, if that makes sense. Not so much because you're miserable and wish you could go back 20 years. Like a lot of the times we do. If that makes any sense. I see some very creative ideas coming up. Recreating, was it the term that they use? Retro stuff. Has something to do with the crafty stuff. I will text me this week so we can do a get together, because I keep forgetting to reach out to you. Card here. The Six of Wands in reverse. Interesting. Let's just see here. Six of Wands in reverse indicates defeat, shattered hopes, and a loss. That's totally not what we were expecting here. But again, we're talking about an emotional response. When the moon comes in, it creates this emotional response. We're talking about being triggered by another person. So who's going through something emotional. So, and I'm not saying that's, he's going to lose his job or you're going to lose him or anything like that. It doesn't take much for us to feel that way. That's where I'm going to go with that. It doesn't take much for us to feel defeated. And I think that's the whole point, is that rather than going to that place where your life is over emotionally, the better option would be to roll through it, move on to something more creative, change the subject into something that's more positive. That's what I have for you. Moving on to Connie. We do have the moon coming into Leo this week. Dun, dun, dun. It's actually not horrible, but I mean, there's some challenges, of course. A funny thing, actually, funny, ironic thing. The moon comes in Thursday, Friday into Saturday, leaves Saturday. Leaves in such a great way, though. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Focus is on the home. This is the funny thing, because I'm like, of course, we just talked about your house and the organizing of the house and how you've been having trouble with that. So focus continues to be on the home, and dealing with that situation. The moon coming in on Thursday moves into a square with the sun and Pluto, which are focused on long-term career goals, so any kind of career stuff, and Jupiter, which is really focused on inner trauma. And what we were talking about the other day in terms of, when you asked, why is this happening to me with my house? It's just like, I can't seem to, I'm keep working and working and working and nothing is getting done. And it mimicking inner trauma. This is like how that's all lining up. Exactly what we were talking about. The moon came in and said, yeah, just like this. This is what that looks like, right? But it sort of sticks a tentacle out and grabs the whole career zone over there, and ropes it into it a little bit. So there's a couple of different things about that. One, really important, I think, around this time. I mean, it's important all the time, but this time specifically, haven't yawned all day, not until I started recording. To either not do paperwork today or to make absolutely sure that you are 150% clear of everything else, so that you're not making these little mistakes, if that makes sense. Not that you're making them all the time, but you definitely are more likely to do so if you're distracted, which isn't good. That's one thing. The other thing is, I almost want to say that it all becomes very overwhelming on this one day, all of a sudden. It's like the moon triggers a lot of these issues to come up. And this also kind of represents, when something happens and you get into, when you start to go down the rabbit hole, if that makes sense, and it becomes very overwhelming. And your career success, it's almost like you're calling it into question. And, if I can't get my personal self together, how am I going to be able to, the drill, right? So I sort of feel like the moon is really bringing this energy into that day. It's not pleasant and it's not exactly, what I want to tell you necessarily, but it is what it is. As we move into Friday, that challenge becomes a lot smaller. It's still there. The moon's in a square with Uranus. Uranus is still focused on your inner closet and getting that stuff out. The moon's is still focused on the home. So we're back to just the mess at the house and the organization that needs to happen, right? And I have to say this too, because this is something that's coming through with your grandmother, who's saying, she's saying, don't look at the amount of things that you have to do. Put in a certain amount of time each day to get through it. It helps you to feel more successful in terms of cleaning up and organizing, because you have successfully put in 2 hours every day instead of unsuccessfully fixing this problem, if that makes sense. It may just be what you need to kind of tweak the energy just enough to where it feels better. And this is what it's all about most of the time. Perception is everything, right? And so just this slight little change on the perception kind of changes the way you look at the situation. You're still going to look or walk around and go, God, this is a mess, but you'll still feel better knowing that you put the acquired amount of time into dealing with the mess. And I think that this has a lot to do with inner child healing as well. I think that we should check in with ourselves daily, just to see where we're at, just to honor that that's where we are, just to um kind of uh just to kind of reconnect with yourself. And I think the more you reconnect with yourself and who you are and what you're going through physically right now, it helps you to not connect so much to what was, because you're focusing on what is, if that makes sense. Saturday, the moon leaves, and as it leaves in a grand trine with Jupiter and Venus. Venus is focused on finances. Jupiter is still cleaning out that closet, yes. The moon's like right there on the cusp of those you love and your home. And to me, it means you've done some organization. It means you've cleaned out that closet. It means it's almost like, sometimes in the healing process, it does feel like no matter how much work we put into it, we never get there. It never makes a difference. We're still pissed off. We can't get past it. We can't let it go. And then one day, something happens and it affects you in a different way. And hours later, when you're reflecting on it, you go, oh, look what I did. I made progress. And it's like this big celebration. And that's awesome, right? So I kind of feel something around that, which reflects in your environment also, because I do feel that as well. It is not just something you can see within yourself, but it's also progress or physically around you as well, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say it's a bad week. I would say there's a bit of a challenge. You're gonna get that once a month when the moon comes in anyways. But it's not, well, let me just put it this way. It can take up the whole week. It can take up a couple of days. That's really up to you. Those are choices that we make every day. I'll be honest with you. Some days I choose to let it take up the whole day, and sometimes I don't. It's situational. Mm. Ace of Wands in reverse, which is all about setbacks and delays. Go figure. I know, I know. Story of your life, story of my life, story of everybody's life. I mean, setbacks and delays happen all the time. And it also says it's important to reconsider plans and ventures. Which I don't necessarily feel that you have to reconsider things. I do kind of get from that, though, that you also want to look at, focus on the organization of the stuff and look at where you may be creating more work for yourself instead of making it easier to get it done. It's what's causing the setbacks and delays. There is also the possibility that these setbacks and delays could be coming up around paperwork for, your business. So those things may infiltrate it and sort of become part of the emotional challenge, especially around Wednesday, where the moon is sitting right now. So that's what I have for you, Connie. Moving on to Jenny. No planets in Leo until the end of the week, because we're pretty much rounding out the week with the moon in Leo, which has its good points and its bad points as usual. We're going to focus is on the home. So up until the moon comes in, I mean, honestly, yes, there's an element of focusing on certain aspects of things at home to make sure things run smoothly, because you're about to move into that crazy time. And so there is an element of that, but I see you at work a lot also preparing for that crazy time as well. So home to me is, it's almost like you want to spend more time at home and can't, if that makes any sense at all. The moon coming in on Thursday moves into a T-square, which is a pretty big challenge, with the Sun and Pluto, which are focused on career goals specifically, and Jupiter, which is focused on inner trauma, so triggers. And because it's Jupiter, and Jupiter is all about more, probably more than one trigger, to be honest with you. And this kind of, the way I visualize it for you is like you're almost being pulled in two different directions. You're pulled to be at home, but you're pulled to be at work. Almost like, yeah, I mean, this is that whole, I want to just be a mom and be there to, make costumes for the kids' school plays and do all of that, sort of stuff that women get to do when they stay at home. But you're being pulled back, and I kind of feel work pulling you in when you're not supposed to be in at the same time. And I'm not sure if this is the office or a client. So it sort of feels very overwhelming to the point where you just want to like throw your hands up in the air and start screaming enough from all of you, just F off everybody. And this is really triggering some old stuff, specifically around individuals. It's a disrespect of your time. It's not respecting. It's not respecting your time. And that is really frustrating for you. That's a really deep trigger. Um, yeah, that's a really deep trigger. The part of you almost just wants to like disappear. I mean, go home and like get under the covers and just pretend you're dead for a day or so. There might even be a little bit of a illness, cold, flu, something like that going around that might be affecting this also, possibly. As we move into Friday, that becomes a little bit less. I mean, it's not quite as big of a challenge. It's a much smaller challenge. There is still a square between the moon and, oh my God, Uranus. Um, which is also focused on inner trauma. So to me, this feels just kind of like a review of the day before. This is what how I did a good job handling it. This is how I didn't do a good job of handling it. This is what I can keep doing. This is what I need to improve on. And just sort of kind of releasing it and letting it go and letting it be what it is. Um, I want to say there's an element of making amends in there too. Just because in certain circumstances like that, it's really easy to to kind of snap, and then we feel bad because it's that's not what you wanted to do. The end of the week is really the most interesting because even though the moon does move into opposition with Saturn, and the moon's right on the cusp of Leo and Virgo, so it's also right on the cusp of the home and family. It just brings the togetherness time, right? And all that time you've been trying to spend at home, you finally get that time. And it's not just, I get to be home, it's quality time. It's like everybody gathering together is the feeling that I get from this. And Venus is all about finances. So it's sort of bringing, I've let go of the old. It's not weighing me down anymore. I've opened up the doors to create some more income. I'm spending time with my girls. Life is good. Which is to me the gift of working through your lesson when you think about it. It's kind of how that works. I'm gonna pull a card for you. So yeah, a couple of days. They're a little challenging, but when you're rewarded after, it's kind of makes it worth it. I don't think we still go out of our way to choose to continue to do it, to go through it, but then again, I don't really think we have a choice either in most cases. Ways. The Hermit in reverse. So when I said possible illness or flu in there, could just be emotionally overwhelmed also. And the Hermit in reverse is that the world hates me. Why does the world hate me? And this is where we want to just hermitize ourselves. This could be a lot of why you're trying to spend time at home and it's just not working, you're trying to hide, but they keep finding you. And you just want to be a hermit. You just want to be left alone. And you can't. It just does not seem that life is going to give you that space. And I think part of the reason why this is happening is because this is part of the lesson. It's not about you disappearing. It's not about you hiding. You're not, you don't get to hide in this situation, unfortunately. It may be what you naturally would rather do, but you don't get to. You have to learn to figure out a different way of dealing with it because hiding just isn't going to work, I guess. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Linda. So we really have a week full of no planets right up until the very end of the week on Saturday when the moon comes in. But before we get to that, we focuses on those you love. Juno and the dark moon are still very much influences. Juno is still retrograde this week. Juno represents how we relate to others. And with focused on family, I feel like there's a couple of different things that are happening here. One, I'm reminded of a conversation that you told me about that you had with your daughter where she was like, I don't understand why, you're not spending all day at the hospital with your husband and, how come you only spend an hour with him a day, that's not understanding, the relationship that you guys have, but looking at it from her own perception. It's almost like I feel like for the past couple of weeks, even, it just seems like somebody keeps asking you why are you still working? Why do you choose to live your life in the way that you're choosing? There's all of these different questions, and it's getting really frustrating because your natural reaction is to be like, mind your business. This has nothing to do with you, Um, it's getting annoying, to say the least. And that's, I think, what's fueling the dark moon's need for change. It's like I need to change this family back to what is a quote unquote normal, where the parents have the final say, so to speak, and the parents, they're the ones that have the wisdom, and the kids to just, you know, be quiet and accept that for what it is, because it feels like the kids are trying to take more control. And I think that that's what's bothering you about the situation is it's not their place, and quite frankly right now it's not their time to do that either. The moon coming in is fascinating as it's coming into your sign on Saturday, about midday Saturday, probably earlier for you. It does, oh, sorry about that. It does come in opposition with Saturn. Saturn is focused on your support system. And I think that this might have something to do with the family dynamic being unacceptable right now, if that makes sense, because I think it's very common, actually. Kids take over their adults, they know better, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about, kind of a thing. And it gets really frustrating. Your husband may be in the situation that he's in, but you're not. And that's That's a lot of where the frustration comes from, because it's almost like you feel they're treating you like you're either also in the same situation as your husband, or you think they think that you should be. I don't know any way to explain it that doesn't sound just like really, really rude. So I really feel that this opposition with Saturn has a lot to do with it. It's like, the people are that their response, they're supporting you responsibly, but that support tends to feel like control, and that's where you resist in panic even, which makes sense. The good news is the moon comes into Virgo in a grand trine with Jupiter and Venus. Now, Venus is focused on finances, creative ways to deal with those financial things that come up. Jupiter's focus is on inner trauma, releasing inner trauma. So I feel like this, our initial reaction is always make the uncomfortable thing stop, take their control away, yell at them, it's always a defensive attack. Okay. But this coming together is more like, let's all come together and enjoy each other. This isn't about work. This isn't about what you have to do or what I have to do or what he has to do. Let's just all come together and enjoy each other. And not fight over this right now. And completely change the energy so that the conversation can be done very differently, and maybe in a less aggressive and possibly offensive way, if that makes sense. So honestly, there's not a whole lot of I mean, you're working, where your husband is. So in a sense, happened last week too. In a sense, mm, you get to see him while you're working. It's still family time. But this is more like we need to get out of this we're all disagreeing, and create this space where we're all just getting along for a bit. Remember who we are. Remember that we're a family, that we're the parents, that you're the kids, that you're the grandkids, and enjoy it being like that for a bit. To kind of put things back into perspective a little bit, rather than grabbing them kids and banging their heads together until they do what you tell them to do. Okay, one more shuffle. Split the cards. Nine of Pentacles in reverse. Interesting. Nine of Pentacles in reverse indicates financial loss or danger in property matters, which can totally trigger these kids thinking they need to take control. Two things. I don't see a financial loss so much as a chunk of money needs to go in a specific place, and there may not be agreements about that. And when I say it needs to go in a specific place, that's where you want it to go, but it may not be what they think you should do. The other thing is, I do get a sense of something that seems like it's not falling through when you thought it was in the bag, if that makes sense. And I don't really feel that it means that it's not gonna fall through. There's a delay there. So it could just be a delay and not a total loss, if that makes sense. That's what I have for you, Linda. And I think we'll be seeing each other next week, as a matter of fact. Let me double check. Let me just double check that right now. On the 28th. On the 28th. Next week. So I will look forward to that. Okay, moving on to Matalyn. No planets in Virgo until the end of the week. The moon is coming in. Just the tip. Just a little bit on Saturday. She starts to come in on Saturday. So we're gonna kick off next week with the moon in Virgo also. But up until that point, we still have Juno and we still have the dark moon in Virgo. Juno is still retrograde. So a couple of things here. Focuses on those you love. With Juno's influence, I do get a sense of it's like you're not agreeing with somebody or you don't see eye to eye about something, but you think it's okay to agree to disagree and they don't for some reason. I'm not even sure who this is, to be honest with you. Um but it's almost like they come in and they're just like, okay, that's it. It's like the typical what's happening in the world right now. You have differences of opinion politically, and now you can't be friends or family for that matter. That's kind of the feeling of it. It's like, all of a sudden this person's like that's they just ghost you all of a sudden, and you're like, well, what the just happened? I kind of get this sense, and I don't know who it's coming from. I almost want to say it's a family member, but not like, your mom or your dad, there might even be an element of that, actually, to be honest, there might be an element of that with one of them. Uh Not as likely your dad, I have to say. But it does put you in this sort of position where it's like a panicky feel, like someone would actually do that. And then at the same time, it may just turn out to be nothing. Like they weren't ghosting you, they just weren't available, you know, something weird along those lines. Um, you may even have a feeling that that's actually an excuse. That they really were ghosting you and they were just pretending that they weren't. And, I go with your gut. That's all I got to say about that. Um, at the same time, the dark moon's influence is like you do have to change that dynamic. You want to put yourself in a position to be above that at all times. You don't exactly entirely know what that looks like. That's okay. Um, Trust me when I say you figure it out as you go. And that is the truth. You figure it out as you go. Um, and I think that that's where a lot of people get hung up is that nobody wants to do anything until they have all the facts in front of them. And that's not how life works. It's a journey. Part of that journey is the learning process. Um, and you can't have everything just handed to you because learning it is sort of what helps you learn to use it. and learn to use it in different ways, because we don't always use the information in the same way, if that makes sense. But this isn't changing like your family. Like, I, wish I could just change all the people in the family, take these people out and put these people in. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, in some cases, I feel like you're changing the importance that you give certain people on your list. Let's look at this moon on Saturday here, which might give us a clue as to what I'm talking about, because I really have none. The moon comes in, it's about noon, okay, and it's right on the cusp of Leo and Virgo. So noon is coming in to your sign, comes in opposition with Saturn, will probably be in opposition with Neptune. Also, by the end of the day, both planets are focused on your support system. Two things. One, it is your responsibility to make sure you're choosing reliable support. What that means to me is a lot of times we look to somebody who should be supportive because of who they are, and it turns out they're not, but we want them to be, so they should just be supportive, right? Because we want them to be. It doesn't work like that, and that trips people up like all the time, all the time. So being responsible for who is part of that support system means that you're picky and choosy, that you only rely on people that you can rely on when you need to rely on them, if that makes sense. Um, the moon is in a grand trine as it's coming into your sign also with Jupiter and Venus. Venus is focused on finances. Jupiter is focused on cleaning out that emotional closet. What's interesting is what you're going through now, especially in your family dynamic, the last few years, the events that have taken place in the last few years, what you're going through with your mom right now. Um, these are all things that circumstances that take place that start to teach us bad habits. We start to get very defensive. We start to get very, I have to protect myself from being hurt. And because these things are happening now, it gives you an opportunity to decide whether or not you want to do what everybody else does or work through it now so you're not carrying it into basically the rest of your life, if that makes sense. Um, I would vote for not doing what everybody else does, only because sometimes it looks like they're getting what they want, but ultimately they never win. They never get what they truly want. They're literally chasing it for their entire lives. Um, but for some strange reason, everybody does it. So I would think, my own personal opinion here, which means everything, of course, but you're above that. You're not like everybody else. You don't have to be like everybody else. And it is a choice. It's not this person was just born not like everybody else. No, they made choices, very specific choices, um, to be who they chose to be and who they wanted to be and what is most successful for them, if that makes sense. All right. Okay. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Let me pull a card. Thanks, your reading was so hard this week. It's almost like I can't really see it. So hopefully the little tidbits kind of made sense. That does happen occasionally when I'm not meant to see exactly what it is. Um, and it is confusing to me because I'm used to it being a little bit more clear, giving me a little bit more detail, and when it doesn't, it's almost like I'm getting lost in it, if that makes sense. I don't know. Seven of Swords is the card that I pulled for you. Tricky situation requiring great care, treachery, and deceit. That might make it make a little bit more sense. Last thing I'm going to say is this. Your intuition tells you what you need to know. Your brain tells you what you want to know. Really want to say that one of your cousins, the many, many, many cousins that you have, there's an issue with one of them. Like they're trying to get you to do something or lend them money or something that you just don't feel right about. There's just something that doesn't feel right. Your intuition tells you what you need to know. Your brain tells you what you want to know. You have to step out of what you want and focus on what is. And the more you do that, the less chance you have of getting taken advantage of. And I don't mean any disrespect to your family. The Hubble side is what I'm talking about. But I have a lot of experience with many members of that family. And I am just going to say that not everybody is above board, even to each other. So, with that being said, just be careful. And if something doesn't feel right or you can't help them, don't. But don't compromise what you feel is right simply because somebody thinks that you should. So that's my half for you, darling. I'm going to take a little break before we get to the rest of the readings. Okay, moving on to Glennis. Hope you're feeling better. We should do a chit chat soon. See if we can figure out why you're having trouble finding the video or accessing the video, whatever the trouble is. Because I'm not 100% sure on that. That's what we need to figure out. Mainly because a lot of people have had issues, getting into the website, or whatever. And I have it on the Facebook group, and a lot of people have had issues, and they've had very different issues. And so until I can really understand what the issue is, it's kind of hard to fix it. Focuses on your day-to-day schedule this week. We had a little break, where everything was kind of in between focuses last week. That has changed to really being focused on what you want to get accomplished throughout the day. Your goals, things like that. I kind of I kind of see this as a slow progression into getting back into quote unquote normal, if that makes sense. Um, but it is a slow progression. Definitely not something that you can or should race through, if that makes sense. And I kind of sort of see days where you feel great. So you do a whole bunch of stuff. and then, the next day you don't feel so great. So balancing that out and not, I think we human beings have this tendency to, it's like all or nothing. Either we're expending all of our energy or we're expending none of it. And, it's you're a Libra, right? It's all about balance. Um, it was kind of funny. When my husband got COVID, the first time when he got COVID, we did talk to a doctor after his test came back positive, and he was sick as a dog, but it didn't matter because he was so bored with sitting around and doing nothing. And as sick as he was, that was the whole thing, was I can't stand sitting here anymore. And I was being the wonderful taking care of wife that I was like, no, you stay in bed, you're sick. And so when we were able to talk to a doctor, which called us, um, he said, "Can I get up and do stuff now?" Because he was just going crazy. And so the doctor said yes, because it was one of the things with COVID was very important that you do get out of bed, that you don't lay in bed. Actually, it was the worst thing in the world to do with COVID, was to just lay in bed. You have to be up and moving around to get yourself to cough the stuff out. And so he said, "Does that mean that I can get up now? Because I can't stand sitting here anymore." And she said, "Yes, don't overdo it, but get up, do what you're gonna do. As soon as you're tired, rest." It literally took him an hour. Like, he was out of that chair, cleaning, which is not something that he would normally want to do, cleaning and organizing, and then he was, like, out for the rest of the day. So it was like, it was just the whole, "No, you can't," that bothered him. Once he had permission, he didn't really need to. Yes. Oh, and I think that that's a lot of, being sick. That's what frustrates us, is our bodies are saying no, and our minds are going, Who are you to tell me what to do?" It's just your body. Um, it's just your mind. So I can see that. In fact, the only time I ever want to clean my closet is when I'm stuck in bed sick, having to stare at it, and it looks terrible. The rest of the time I kind of ignore it or visit it, in very short spurts, and go, "Oh God, this is terrible. I need to do something about this someday." And then I run away, and I'm not focused on it anymore. So I never really work up to really want to do this, because, there's just usually, that's not where my time goes, if that makes sense. So I kind of feel like this week is a good week. We don't have the moon coming in. That is going to happen next week. So it's sort of a very clear space to just kind of slowly put one foot in front of the other, slowly sit down and get back into what you were doing before, what your plans were before. You did get sick and couldn't do anything. I almost want to say there's something that you're not looking forward to getting back up and doing. And that might be part of the struggle also. Like, if you're okay enough to get to these certain chores that you want to, you should be okay enough to get back to these certain chores that you don't want to do also. I think we're kind of, I think we all go through that a little bit as well. Um, because it's nice to have a break from them. I mean, that's every cloud has a silver lining, and that is the silver lining of being sick, is not having to deal with things we have to do every day that we really don't want to. And we have an excuse when we're sick, somebody else does it. And when we feel better, it's usually handed right back to us. So stop beating yourself up over that, because oh my God, you're human. The Devil in reverse. This is a very good card, actually. Definitely want it in reverse, because the Devil is really in reverse, is all about healing. It is very specific types of healing, like, kicking addiction habits and bad habits and, things that are quote unquote destructive for you. Um, to me, this card, what's interesting about what this card is giving me is that I feel like this illness that you've had is not the only reason why you've been going through these issues. Like, this is emotional as well, if that makes sense. It's almost like in the last couple of weeks of the year into the first couple of weeks of the year, you've had this huge thing on your mind, and you're kind of rolling over it and rolling over it and rolling over it, which I've heard you use the term your brain, you don't even know where your brain is, or your brain's something about your brain in this process. And so I think it's being distracted by something else, probably something that you really don't have any control over. So um that's why it gets obsessive, because you want to do something, but you can't. And so consequently, I kind of feel like this week you just kind of sort of put that in its place. You stick it in a box and go, okay, I'm done with you because I can't do anything with you right now. You can stay in the box 'cause there's nothing you can do about it. And that really kind of helps clear up some space for you as well. Specifically mentally, but also energy wise, when are kind of worrying about something in that capacity, it really does take up a lot of energy. Um, Sometimes a lot more energy than we really have to give it. Does that make sense? So that's what I have for you, my friend. And yeah, let's chit chat soon. I am going to move on to Regina. No planets in Scorpio. We still have Pallas Athene in Scorpio. Still focused on relationships also. And that's about it. We won't have the moon coming in this week. That will happen next week. So maybe maybe prepare. I don't know if that's what if you want to prepare, that is. Two things for you. There's also an element of it's also sort of an element of your day-to-day schedule influence, because that's what Libra's influence is right now. And I actually feel like this is more you being in a place where the structure of life is just not working for you anymore. You go to work, you go home. You go to work, you go home. You kind of like it that way. You don't really want to socialize all that much, you go to work and you come home. I just feel like this week you're sort of in this space where you're tired of that. Like, you'd like to incorporate something more into that. Maybe not like going to a party and socializing on a scale like that, but incorporating more socializing time with people that you are comfortable with socializing with, if that makes sense. There is a personal connection that is needed there in some way. And I kind of feel like you're putting some time into what you can do about that and how you can make that happen, if that makes sense. Um, I'm gonna say that hubby has something to do with that as well. Not like you're socializing together, because I feel like the socialization thing is more, pardon me, it's more about what you're doing to fill the time when he's gone. but there is an element of wanting to change the relationship to where you have more time enjoying time together and less time dealing with the problems, dealing with the arguments, things that just happen in, the normal progression of relationships as people get kind of used to each other, I guess. Um, it's a lot of plans. I'm also seeing you sitting at a table with all these cards. So I don't know if this has to do with you doing tarot cards. They don't look like tarot cards. They look like index cards, um, where you could write recipes down on them. But I feel like all of these index cards are plans too. And I think tarot cards have something to do with that. It's like you have all these ideas of all of these things that you want to do, and they've just been kind of swimming around in your head for a long time. And you're just like, you know what? I'm going to write them down, put them in order of most important to least important, and make sure they get done. Make sure I create a process to do these things. If that makes sense. Which is a really good way of doing it. The other thing that I'm being shown for you is keep looking at Palace Athene, but I don't see fighting. I don't see fighting with anybody. Except for yourself and your own needs and what you want, standing up for yourself. This is like, it's almost like you stepped in to the room and you're like, guess what? I'm not compromising what I want anymore. I am going to make what I want to do a priority. I'm going to make me a priority. I'm going to make my goals a priority. I really see you stepping up to the plate a lot this year. I mean, not that you haven't been, but it's like you're done letting fear take the wheel. And being done letting fear take the wheel, you're taking the wheel. You're saying, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it unapologetically. I love that. And I do see you setting the wheels in motion in terms of some of those things. If that makes sense. It's really kind of cool, actually. It's almost like there's really nothing. It's not that there's nothing to focus on, because that's not true, but I also feel like there's been some time that's opened up for you to just really focus on you and your plans and your goals and what you want to do and what you want to achieve and how you want to do it. And life is always going to come in and create challenges, and you're just at this point where you're like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Let life do it. Don't tempt fate. That's a good idea. But you know what I mean. There's a lot of freedom in just saying, screw it. Let's see what happens. I love that. Seven of Swords. I'm going to do another one. That card's come up like 3 times today. I'm going to do another one. If it comes up a second time, then apparently this is the card of the week for everybody. That's seriously, it's already come up like twice. And it doesn't, not unheard of. Okay, it has happened in the past, but it's just a little excessive. So I'm gonna go with better be safe than sorry. Nine of Pentacles in reverse. So that also has come up before. That's funny. Is what it is. Actually, the Nine of Pentacles in reverse is a little bit better than the Six of Swords, really. It does indicate money loss. It does indicate danger in property matters, which I do not see for you, by the way. I think that this is really around fears of money loss more so than actual a loss of money. But I do see you having more time on your hands too, which is interesting. And there could be, an element of you trying to step back away from your job and not spend so much time there, but the worry of the loss of the money that you're making by not being there, is kind of a bit of a challenge or an adjustment, if that makes sense. Um, but no, I don't see like, you put money on the horses and lose a chunk of your life savings. No. And I don't see any issues with your property necessarily. I do see you wanting to use that property for specific purposes, and that you may run into some complications with that. Doesn't mean you're going to lose the property, but there may be some complications with that, and the complications are more like adjustments that need to be made, not no, you can't do it. That makes sense. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Theresa, we have no planets in Scorpio this week. Focus continues to be on relationships. Pallas Athene continues to influence those relationships with her aggressive warrior queen mentality that she has. And then we have been focusing a lot on her fight or flight, I guess, mentality the last few weeks though, but it's not. I want to say just because she's the warrior queen, it doesn't necessarily mean that all she does is fight either. I kind of feel like this week there's a couple of different things that come up. One is personal, and one is professional. On a personal level, it seems like you may have to advocate for somebody, but it's not who you would normally think you'd have to advocate for. I know that doesn't make sense, but it could be something along the lines of, like say, well, an example, I'm just in a situation, my son's hurt himself a couple of times, and the doctors that are dealing with him are stupid. And my mama, mentality is just go in there and knock some heads together and tell them how they need to do this to make sure that he gets the right treatment, which I cannot do. But if he were to ask me, that would be a different story. So it could be a situation like with one of your children, for example, where they're just, they're not getting the results they need to get for something. They come to you in order to, have you help sort of guide them in the direction that they need to go in order to get what they want. Give them the right words to say, in order to make sure that they get what they need, if that makes sense. And it could be a doctor's appointment thing. I'm not saying that it's not, but I mean, I don't see that it's terminal or anything like that. It's just it's almost like something is going on. They're trying to get it resolved. They can't. They keep running into, one wall after another, and you're like, okay, here, this is how you need to do it. Just say these words to get the results that you want. If that makes sense. Um, then we move on to the professional, where I really feel that your warrior queen mentality is needed for another individual. So either you're advocating for a client, or you're advocating for somebody you work with, if that makes sense. And I feel that, again, it's really the same situation. It actually, it may even put you in a situation where it feels like, this is what I'm doing this week. Okay. I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for all these other people. Right. And there's a reason why. I mean, you're really good at it. You know exactly the right words to say to get the wheels in motion, to get things moving. And that's why you're called upon to do it. And I think even in the professional realm of things, I don't think you were asked to do it. I think you just go, this is what we're going to do. Right? In order to get this resolved. And basically it does. Everything does get resolved. At the end of the week, everybody has what they need. Everybody's happy. Theresa is um the mom of the year, the employee of the year. Everything is great. You sort of move on. So it's you're not putting out fires for yourself. You don't have any. You're putting out fires for other people. And you're called upon to do this because you're really good at doing it. And that's, you want the best, you go to the best, right? I mean, just makes sense. Mm. Oh, and it's so nice and hot and yummy. So yeah, nothing major. In fact, I don't even see, I would say outside of that, things are just kind of boring and maybe even mundane, nothing out of the ordinary. All right. So your boring is different than somebody else's boring. It's nothing out of the ordinary outside of feeling like you're having to fight other people's battles on both sides. But it's like one instance. You know how we embellish in our mind. Oh my God, I'm fighting all these battles. It's only two, we do that. We do that. Queen of Cups in reverse. Very interesting. Very interesting, because so you advocating for the people does kind of put you in that leadership position. The kings and queens, of course, are the leadership cards. In reverse, they do have an adverse effect. The Queen of Cups in this position indicates emotions are ruling your head. Need to gain a clear perspective. Need to stop living according to others people's desires and stop allowing others to take advantage. So that last line right there, absolutely, absolutely. There's so many different reminders that come up about that. I get that. But I feel being in that sort of leader position and being a woman, you definitely want to deal with this with a clear head. I think that honestly, when it's personal, when it's your family, when it's your children, it can be very difficult to separate the emotions of how you feel. Or like for me personally, I have a really hard time not being aggressive in a situation like that, especially when I'm not getting what I want. So this, I think, is where this is coming from. It's saying, you have to lead in the right way. And becoming emotional is not necessarily going to be helpful. In fact, it may hinder your progress a little bit. Instead of, take the time to kind of release how you feel about it so that you can focus on the situation with a clear head. It gets better results without having to drive your point in an emotional way, if that makes sense. And a strong leader knows that self-care is really important. So make sure that you're not burning the candle on both ends while you're doing this. You're taking your time and toggling back and forth and giving each one the proper focus. Not that by not doing that, it's going to be destructive for them. It won't be destructive for them. It'll be destructive for you. It'll be a problem for you. And that's what you want to avoid. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Jillian, no planets in Scorpio this week. Focus is still on relationships. Pallas Athene still in Scorpio, probably for a week or so. Unless she goes retrograde and comes back, which I don't know about 100%. I have to say, warrior goddess doesn't always fight. Sometimes she leads. Sometimes she takes over because she needs to take over and deal with the situation. And this sort of reminds me of that time with Lil and Isabel, where there was a problem and it was dumped in my lap, and I could not figure out what to do about it or what to think about it or anything. And you got involved and straightened the whole thing out. Weren't asked, just did. And it was lifted off of me immediately in that moment. Now, I never in a million years would have thought to reach out to you about it. Not because I didn't think you could handle it, but because it wasn't about you. And the reason that I would not have per se reached out to you about it is because I didn't want to put it on you. It was like a burden, and I didn't want to transfer the burden from me to you, especially when you had nothing to do with it. If you had been named in it, that would have been a different story. But I kind of feel like this is the order of the week. Is, a situation comes up, it's plaguing a person, you take control of it, you deal with it. And I know you do that a lot for your grandma. Um, a lot. And you only do it for people that you 100% love and trust and respect. But I also just have to say that while that is noble, it's not always necessary, and it's not always a good idea, especially if you're doing it for somebody constantly. They start to get used to the fact that you're going to do it, and then they don't want to do it themselves. And then it becomes a problem because eventually you're not going to want to do it, or you're going to be too busy to do it, and they're not going to know how to do it because you've always done it for them. So balance is really important in terms of, in a situation like what we were talking about with the girls. That's different. That was a situation that really just needed, you know we needed to get past the what the and just, you know find some sort of resolution to it. But not everything is like that, and that's what I'm saying. I want to say specifically, this is very important within your relationship, is that you don't just jump up and handle and fight all of his battles and all that stuff. I know you want to, because I want to, in my same situation, but it's not good, okay? For multiple different reasons. One, a man can't have a woman fighting. for him. It emasculates him. It's like he's not even a man anymore. And, they'll do everything that they possibly can to avoid that, especially men who are men, like your Uncle Dave, like your boyfriend. They are men. And real men need to stay that way because there's just too few of them in the world now. So we need to keep them that way as much as possible. Um, as hard as it is, sometimes you just have to stay out of it and let them deal with it in the way that they need to deal with it, in the best way for them, I guess. The other thing is, the warrior goddess isn't just a fighter, she's also a lover. And when you have an aggressive personality, like you and I do, for example, um, it's hard to, it's almost like we have to choose one and be one or the other. And that's not true. We can actually be both. In fact, I enjoy being a lover a lot more than I enjoy being a fighter, honestly. And so, but it took me a long time, I think, because I had to fight my whole life. And it's hard to step away from that because we kind of feel like, as soon as we stop, something's going to pop up and we're not going to be prepared or something like that. We're always going to be prepared. It's going to be fine. That part of us is always going to be there, but we don't have to live it. And I really feel that that's also what Palestine's influence is all about for you this week, is remembering that there's always a balance between both sides of ourselves. I'm going to pull a card for you. Four swords. Gee, this is kind of kicking it. Four of swords. Strong need for rest. See? Because he's just kicking it. He's just laying there, not doing anything. I don't feel like you're overworking necessarily or you're overdoing it, but I do feel that your rest is not always restful. You may not be doing anything, but if you're in your head going 1,000 miles a minute, that's not resting. So you're not quite replenishing your energy and you're constantly tired as a result. So I feel like this card is coming up for you because meditation, meditation, because it's not just about your body. You have to emotionally rest, you have to mentally rest, you have to physically rest. It's a whole thing. Sometimes for me, when my brain's just too overactive, I visualize a trunk and when the thoughts come up, I throw them in the trunk and slam the door. And that's my way of establishing that I'm not dealing with that right now. I can always come back to it. Like it will always come back. I'm not going to forget. Um, we kind of convince ourselves that we will forget if we don't obsess over it, which is not true. That's a form of self-sabotage. So try to avoid that if you can. That's what I have for you, darling. Moving on to Peg, we have a few more days of Venus in Sagittarius, a few days meaning Sunday and Monday. And by Tuesday, it's moving out. It is in a square with Neptune in the time that it is in there. Focus is still on finances currently right now. That square with Neptune, sort of interesting about it is they're both very feminine planets. And money and the management of money is a very masculine experience. And you're dealing with creative and, kind of flowy influences, intuitive influences. It's almost like you have some ideas of what you want to do. Somebody else comes in with their logic and says, no, you can't do that. That's just preposterous. But your intuition is pulling you to do this. That's why you have the idea. And so it sort of puts you in this position to where, you're like, do I ignore my intuition and what my intuition is saying, or do I follow it? And, and it's an uncomfortable decision to make, especially if the person that's telling you, no, that's preposterous is your husband. Because of course, you're stuck with him. So if it doesn't work out, he's going to hold it over your head. I'm sure he wouldn't do this, but there's always the possibility, right? The point is we convince ourselves to do all kinds of crazy things and, come up with all kinds of different worries to feed that, if that makes sense. So as difficult as the decision is, I feel like, in all honesty, it's good to take that person's advice into consideration, but maybe find a compromise instead of it being so black and white, if that makes sense. Venus is also in a grand sextile with Jupiter and Saturn, which is also focused on those that support you. Really professional support. So maybe a third opinion is a good option. But I also feel like this sort of, oh my God, what do I do, is kind of an old trigger, because this is a situation that you dealt with before in terms of people telling you what to do or feeling like people are telling you what to do rather than feeling like you have the freedom to choose. And so it kind of opens everything up to be like, okay, so you have this side and you have this side. Well, let's ask a professional what they think and see, or get some sort of insight into this, to see what comes up, to see what the best course of action is. Because I feel like this does have to do with finances, and whether it is a new job opportunity or work opportunity, or whether this has to do with how you're handling your finances, if that makes sense. Ceres is still very much an influence over those finances, also that sort of maternal security vibe that Ceres has. And that may have an influence on it as well, because these could be long-term plans. And this is why, if you're, it's almost like you're, the word just went right out of my head. It's almost like you're researching options. These are new options. So like, say if you are talking to your husband about it, if he can't identify it, his initial reaction is going to be no. Nobody's ever heard of that. We're not doing that. Whereas your intuition is kind of pulling you in that direction. And he understands that, but it's the fear that's talking, not necessarily him. So there may be other ways of being able to do what you want to do, but in a way that's a little bit less scary, or there are words that you can use to put him in a place where it's not quite so scary, if that makes sense. And the other thing that I'm kind of picking up from this for you is I kind of feel like the word I'm getting is options, multiple options, money making options, intuition. Don't block your intuition. Give it a voice, at the very least, an opinion, and write it down and put it down as one of the options, one of the possible options. The Hermit in reverse totally does not go with what I was saying, but the Hermit in reverse, well, maybe it does. The Hermit in reverse is that quintessential you against the world. The whole world is out to get me. Like, you're just in this angry place where you don't get what you want, and nobody really cares if you're happy about it or not, which is annoying. It's really frustrating to be in that situation. And this could be what is behind these choices. Now, in my experience, very recent experience, anger over things not working out and trying to find a quick fix for it doesn't work very well, or at all, I should say. So, with that being said, it's a good idea to work through that first, kind of get that out of your system, and then focus on the best options and not necessarily the quick fix that your fear is wanting, if that makes sense. That's what I have for you, Peg. Moving on to Mama Sherri. We still have Venus in Sagittarius for the first couple of days of the week, Sunday and Monday. It is gone by Tuesday. Focus is still on finances. Ceres is still influencing those finances. And to me, for you, Ceres influencing your finances means you enjoy having the money to give, not to provide, but to give. It's extra food so that you can make more food and share it. It's having extra blankets for when somebody comes and sleeps over. It's all about giving to others. That makes sense. And Ceres, I mean, that is so you anyways. But I feel like Ceres is putting you back in the situation to be able to do that again, or at least feel like you can more often than maybe you were before. I also feel like as Venus is leaving Sagittarius, it's in a square with Neptune. And I kind of feel that this is creating kind of a challenge, because your intuition is giving you ideas in terms of what to do about your finances, but your brain, your logic is saying, but I can't do that for these various different reasons. And so it's like this constant, let me fix this, no I can't, let me fix this, no I can't. You gotta take a step back out of that and breathe and release the control. Okay, because there's a lot of fear there, there's a lot of security questions there, there's a lot, right? And I feel like I feel like they're really getting in the way of you being able to make that decision. So it's just like, you start to go and then you take a step back. You start to go and then you take it's like a back and forth. I want to say merry-go-round, but it's not. It's more like a swing that just keeps going back and forth. Um, so you just gotta rip off that band-aid and do it. I don't even know how else to say it. Eight of Pentacles. Money, money, money. Money, 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 money. Skills need to be used to their best advantage. Attain goals that are related to your talents. Funny thing, the first thing that comes up with this is somebody approaching you to do something that you are not necessarily comfortable with, that you haven't done before, that is not necessarily a you thing. It creates a little bit of a, maybe this is why you're going back and forth. Honestly, if it doesn't resonate, the answer is no. But it doesn't mean you're going to hurt feelings or anything like that, because just because you say no doesn't mean that this person isn't going to approach you again for something else. But this is an integrity thing. I have to say that this is an integrity thing. Yes. So I'm saying, for example, if somebody approached you to do an astrology reading, you could use what knowledge you have to do it. But if they want a full astrology reading, chances are you're not going to do it, right? Because it's not part of your skill set, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it because I should be doing it. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm only using it as an example in terms of, if a school, for example, comes to you and says, "Can you teach an astrology class?" I mean, obviously, if you don't have any knowledge, you wouldn't do that, right? So it's an integrity issue. You would technically be lying if you said yes, I could do that, right? So this is where I'm saying is that I feel like it's almost like somebody approaches you to do something in a way that's not the way you would normally do things. And in some cases, that's okay. But in this case, it just doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, then you probably shouldn't do it. But don't feel bad about losing out on an opportunity because your integrity shows a lot more than if you just went and did it. If that makes sense. So that's what I have for you. That is what I have for everybody. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with the readings. I'm Melissa Bruce, Heavy Metal Psychic, and I have got to run. I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, everybody.